many of the driven men, they got the upper hand. The picking is slim for some of these women. You got a guy who's having success. He's hiding his wife, lying about his wife, telling people he's not with his wife. The same people who claim that they're busy, I guarantee you, if we had access to their Netflix account, we had access to their cell phone, you will find the amount of time that they burn binging on television shows, wasting time on social media. So the reality of it is you can make the time. There were a group of women, they were holding out with this notion of that they were going to catch themselves a ball player. Highly successful entrepreneur and so forth.
They were looking for the come up.
So they were looking for the come up.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And so what happened is a lot of times the everyday guy has a good regular job, right? Drives a good regular car. And I watched him dismiss those guys.
Oh. Hey family, welcome to The Love Lens. I'm your host, Coach Cass. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below because I'm going to tell you every single episode is going to get better and better and better. Our vision here is for you to change your view on love one episode at a time. So today I have the most special person to me. My husband, Andy Henriquez. Hi, baby.
How you doing? I sort of like that introduction.
You like it? So you guys know, Andy is a business storytelling coach, right? So he helps entrepreneurs, coaches, individuals learn how to tell their story in a more impactful way to make more income. Did I do that right?
You did a good job.
Hey.
You did a good job. I'm going to take you on the road.
Hey, so Andy, you're not a relationship coach, but I decided to bring you here because, you lie next to me every single night and I know your heart and I also know where you've been, all right? So,
what you mean by where I've been?
Where you've been.
What you mean where I've been?
Andy is a reformed player from the Himalayas. Throw your noop up, my Kappa man.
I mean, seriously, Cass?
Yes,
I mean, you just gonna tell me?
Throw it up. Just go ahead and throw it up, So he used to be in the days of FSU and clubbing and doing First Fridays and all that stuff. And I really wanted to talk about, because we've had conversations about this in private, where you have seen many of your friends from long ago still single, women 40s, 50s and more. And I know you've seen some of the problems. So I want to bring it to the light.
Wait a second. We had these conversations off camera. You trying to bring that conversation here,
Yes.
I'm not trying to get myself in any kind of trouble, right?
You might get yourself in some trouble, but I think it's important.
No, so, all right, let's call it for what it is. So here's the conversation we have had, right? Back in the day, when I used to be, before I was a reformed man, right?
Yes.
Hanging out in the clubs on South Beach, I noticed that there were a group of women who were pretty much hanging out, clubbing around the same time. And at that particular time, they were holding out with this notion of that they were going to catch themselves a ball player. Now, when I say a ball player, just like somebody on the upper echelon, whether they played professional football, professional basketball, highly successful entrepreneur and so forth.
They were looking for the come up.
So they were looking for the come up.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And so what happened is a lot of times the everyday guy, right, which oftentimes was a good guy, a guy with a career, good guy, good values,
maybe
would
a little
pursue
nerdy,
them.
no swag.
No, not necessarily nerdy.
Okay.
Just a regular guy. In other words, that, has a good regular job, right? Drives a good regular car, lives in a good regular house, right? That's what I'm talking about. And I watched him dismiss those guys repeatedly. And all of the focus was on that 1%, right? That was going to show up in the club.
A million.
Yeah. So, but here's what the crazy thing is. I watched this over a couple years.
Yeah.
So, but here's what was the interesting thing. When this was happening, those women were also in a youthful prime season in their lives.
Oh, snap.
All right. So when I say that, I believe we're always in our prime, right? So
Okay.
let me go ahead and say that.
I'm in my
But
prime.
they're in a certain youthful season of their primeness, right? A season of fertility, a season that they could be growing with somebody, a season where most people hadn't gotten married yet, didn't have kids yet, and so forth. And I watched them pass on all the regular good guys, holding out for that 1%. Well, here's what eventually happened. They were waiting. Here's what eventually happened. That 1% ended up getting married, or that 1% end up showing themselves, showing out, as I say. So
What you saying?
Well, they end up discovering that that person was probably not the best person to get married to, right? Because they had a lot of situationships, as you would call it, as you would call it, Coach Cass. They had a lot of situationships. But here's what was interesting. I then lost contact with some of those women. Yeah. But then later on, I would encounter them.
Later on, like 10 years.
We're talking about 10 years later. Now, 10 years later, that 1% that they were holding out is no longer available, right? That 1% is either still in their old ways, their old clubbing ways, which now these women are like, that's not what I want anymore. Or they have themselves gotten married, have children, etc., right? But here's what the crazy thing is. These women are now in a new season in their lives. Yeah. And because of the fact that they didn't necessarily get the 1% that they were holding out on, all of the good regular guys, well, they were good guys. So guess what ended up happening? They got married. They're taken, right? So now the good guys are off the market. The 1% is either off the market or they no longer want that because they've matured. They're in a new season in their life. Right. And now those same group of women who had plenty to pick from now find themselves in a new place where now the picking is slim.
Yeah, boy. And I
the
hear
picking
it every day.
is slim. And when I say the picking is slim, Coach Cass, the new guys off the market, 1% off the market are no longer really available. Yeah. And now what's available is really quite interesting. Yeah. Right? We'll call it so now what's available maybe has a significant backstory, right? Now what's available is like already got married and divorced, now has 2 children, now maybe has multiple baby mamas, etc. That's going on. Or the 1% that they were holding out for lost that clout, mismanaged their money, and now don't even want that dude no more, right? Because now they got more wisdom and insight. Yes. And so it's a big mess. It is a big mess. I end up seeing these women, and I'm like, I saw you in a prime season where you had all of this picking, and now you're saying there's no men out there. But when they were there, you didn't want to give them a time of day. But now in this season, you would take so many of those good men, but now they're not available. Man, I can't believe you just had me have this conversation on camera, right?
Y'all done peeled back to our pillow talk, right? And we go back and forth about this whole situation. And so now these women, and I coach successful women every single day. So I hear the stories about the pee in the dating pool and all that. So you're saying, listen, sis, the dating pool was nice when you were in your youthful prime. Yeah. But now because you were focused on other things or focused on the wrong things or messed up the thing you had, now you're back here in this pool.
Now, but let's call it for what it is, right? Because one of the things that I want to make sure that someone's not mishearing, right? Okay. I don't believe now that if you're outside of that youthful prime, that you can't get in an awesome, amazing relationship. Very good. The issue is when you're in this new season outside of that youthful prime and you're still trying to have the same qualifications as when you were in the prime season.
So we can't have qualifications?
So no, you can have qualifications, but now it's like, oh, I still want a guy who doesn't have any children. You're saying you don't want a guy who has any children, but you are now in your 40s or in your 50s, and there's a strong possibility that this guy may have children, right? I don't want anybody that's been married and divorced again. Well, you're in your 40s and your 50s. There are men who in their 40s and 50s who have no children, have been married, divorced. But there are many that also have children, have been married, have been divorced. And so now we got to understand that what you were saying in your late 20s, mid 30s, the pool looks different now that you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. That's all I'm saying.
So that's when we get into standards versus preferences, right?
Yeah.
So my preference is to have somebody without kids, but my standard is I need a God-fearing man, right? So it's like being able to tell the difference between the two and being able to put aside some of those preferences, right? Maybe you can't have kids anymore, right? So I work with a lot of women that, you know, that boat kind of sailed, or they're trying to get on the boat, but it's a whole lot of work, right? And we're going to talk about that in future episodes around infertility and what that whole process is and your hormones. There's so much to go into that and what a woman goes through. And we have that ticking time bomb. But, you know, can you talk a little bit about the standards versus the preferences?
Well, I'll say this. One of the things I've appreciated, because most time when you are with your ladies in the Real Love Network, I get kicked out of the room, right? But those special times that I get invited into the room, one of the things I really love, and I believe you covered this at Wanted Women Live, was that helping people to set these new standards, preferences, expectations, because there's a lot of people that they're still basing their checklist off of another season in their life. And I believe your checklist needs to change with the seasons, because of the fact that lives look differently in early 20s, early 30s versus mid 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? And you coach women at all ages, but I believe it's not just sort of one size fits all, that people need to manage those expectations.
All right, bet.
So I'm grateful. I got to say this. I'm grateful. I'm happily married man to beautiful Coach Cass, right? With our beautiful daughter. But I have to understand, if right now I was out in the dating market in my 40s, I got to understand that the women that I'm meeting, it's going to be a little different than when I was in my late 20s, early 30s.
Right.
They may have a child or two. They may have been married and got a divorce. They may have had some things going on. And I got to decide what's most important to me in this season, in this moment. And I can't be around here using the same exact parameters I had when I was 28 years old or 33 years old.
All right, bet. So let's transition this conversation around what do men want, right? So on every social media platform, you know, you got to cook, recipe book, right? So it's like men want a woman that cooks, that her booty is nice, her hair is long, her, you know what I mean? Like she got to do the
let's say this. Let's say this. Number one, there's no blanket statement for what all men want. All I could do is I could speak from my own truth, right? So prior to me, I grew up Caribbean household that the women were the staple of our households.
They did everything.
And the primary way that they showed love and nurturing was they cooked you a warm meal. They made sure that you were taken care of. They nurtured you. They cleaned up and so forth. So my notion of what, helpmate looks like is somebody that is going to support me through making sure my belly is full with some good food, right? Making sure that the environment that I'm around, the environment that I'm in is nice and clean, that is also going to be able to support me. But here's what I do love about God, right?
Okay.
God knows what you really need.
Exactly.
Right? And so I think, you and I, it was very evident very early on that, cooking was not necessarily
my forte.
Your forte.
No, sir.
Cooking was not your forte.
No.
The cleaning up after people was not necessarily your forte.
Wanting to be
but I'm grateful because of this. I originally thought that that's what I needed, right? But I'm grateful that God knows what I really need. And what I really needed was a helpmate that was going to be more of somebody that I could cast a vision with, that we could support one another, that we would encourage one another, that we had similar visions, similar dreams, that we were in similar verticals. And what God really knew that I needed a Coach Kaz in my life, right? Because Coach Kaz and Andy, we could order food, right? Coach Kaz and Andy have somebody who can come and clean the house, right? Coach Kaz and Andy, don't necessarily I don't have to rely on, hey, is Coach Kaz go cook me something to eat when we can order the food to the house, right? But I didn't know that going in.
Right.
I didn't know that going in.
You didn't know that going in. We had a class, Andy. Remember? Expectations.
We had a class. But what I'm saying is I didn't know that what I thought I needed was not really what I needed.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
So what your wants were different from your needs.
Yes. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's the thing that we have to come to the realization. Some of us, we form those wants early, even without pivoting and realizing like, that ain't really what you need right now.
No.
You know what I mean? Like you think you need somebody who's going to cook and clean, but like, dude, you could hire somebody to cook and clean. That's not really what you need.
Right.
What you need is somebody who's going to lock arms with you and help you to chase this vision and impact lives. That's what you need. What you need is somebody who's going to say, hey, babe, you're amazing, but I know you're even capable of more. What you need is somebody who's going to say, who's going to try to push you even harder and makes you want to be an even better person. That's what you need, right? And that's what God knew about me, which is why he gave me you, right? That. And I think that each one of us, men, need something different.
Okay, so getting clear about what you need. I know the song goes, what you want, baby, I got it, right? So what do we want versus what do we need? So you're helping us to dispel some of those myths about it always being. Now, it's always nice to get a nice plate. A man is never going to turn a good plate down, but at the end of the day, what makes a good wife is not just what she could do in the kitchen, but there's so much more to it. So now, Andy, you are a business storytelling coach. And what I know, you don't always share the stories with me, but you literally are going through hundreds and thousands of stories each and every year to help people bring their stories forward. I know you work with a lot of women and you have read many women's stories. So now that you have like some of the background, some of the things that people would never share with anybody else, right? You're not their therapist, but my goodness, sometimes you're like, yo, Cass, this is heavy. So knowing that insight of what women have been through, professional women have been through, what comes up for you in this conversation to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, here's what I realize is so much of what we're dealing with as adults in our dating lives, right, really stems from luggage that we're carrying from our childhood. And I mean, a therapist will be able to speak to this way better than I could, but I can oftentimes have an opportunity to see somebody's backstory and see a fractured relationship with their father, a lack of love from their father, a lack of safety in the household, being abandoned. And then I can see how all of those things early materialize into their adult life and materialize into their dating life. I mean, I even remember seeing this even in college, right? The young ladies who in college oftentimes maybe had, issues with not receiving love and structure from their father, oftentimes would come to college and then be seeking love in all the wrong places.
Oh, snap.
And oftentimes those young ladies were often taken advantage of, you know what I mean? And sadly, before I changed, I was one of those people taking advantage of that, right? That this person was seeking love, seeking validation externally, and seeking it all the wrong ways. So here's the thing, right? I think that for all of us, even the way that we show up in our marriage, that many of the things that may show up we think it has to do with right now, and it has everything to do with our backstory, right? And if we don't sort of like address and sort of tackle what's happening in that backstory, how is it showing up right now? Remember, I grew up in a household. Check this out. I grew up in a household where my mom was the primary breadwinner. She was also an entrepreneur. She owned 2 beauty salons, restaurant. In addition to that, she was cooking. In addition to that, she was cleaning. In addition to that, she was making sure that she was taking care of me and my brother. And so you got to understand, my idea of like what a woman is supposed to do was like completely through the roof, what many would say like unrealistic, right? Because what I'm saying in my brain is like, oh, well, I watch my mom do it. So yeah, a woman is supposed to cook, clean, run her business, do all these things, take care of her family and all that stuff, and do it all with a smile and never complain and love on everybody. Because that's what I saw. And from a child's perspective, that's what I saw, right? I didn't get an opportunity to have adult conversations with my mom to know the burden that she was carrying, the stress and the weight of all, the burnout, right? The
and how
feeling like, maybe not getting enough support from my dad and all those things. I didn't get to see all those things. I just was seeing from the eyes of a child, and I'm thinking like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be, right? So it's like this notion of, hey, you're supposed to cook, clean, and have your podcast, and write a best-selling book, and be transforming lives through the Real Love Network, and jet setting, and taking care of Ava, and making sure you do the schoolwork, and making sure you're cleaning. So in my brain, there was like, yeah, that's just what you're supposed to do. So there was no like, oh, honey, I noticed you got a lot going on. How do I come around and support you in that? That's not what I saw. That's what my mom just did all those things. Go, right? And I think that, and so that's one aspect, but imagine a person who had an absent parent, a person who was lacking validation, a person whose father came and left, broken promises from their dad, all this luggage, right? People that have had, personal infractions, people that were, abused and all these, these things, they weigh so heavy. And what I find, especially through what we do at the Master Storyteller Academy, is that people are trying to work on stories that they actually haven't even gotten the healing around. And so if I could see that even when I'm helping them to craft their stories, how's that showing up in their relationships? How's that showing up in their lives? How's that showing up for them? So the work you do, it's a game changer because you get these women to stop and deal with the stuff that they don't want to deal with, that they've been basically covering with a bunch of excuses. With there's no good guys out there. What's that statement y'all like to say? There's pee in the dating pool. Whatever the statement is, you know what I mean? Trying to find me a high value man. All these terminologies that I'm like, nah. You are the common denominator. You got some work to do, right? Because there are some good guys out there, and you can be in a happy, fulfilling relationship. And it doesn't matter where you're at. But the thing is, you are the common denominator. And as you were saying, what are you doing, sis? Like, what's the work you putting in?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love all of that. So the audience who's listening in, whether it's watching on YouTube or listening in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening in, knows I had a strong conversation with you. I remember it was through our class, our premarital class, and it was talking about expectations. And I remember saying, when I pop out this baby, right, I'm gonna be able to just kick back. And Andy was like, you were like, no, you gotta keep working. Like, what are you talking about? I was just like,
it's so funny. You always like to bring that up, but let's put it up for two ways, right? You were like, oh, when I have a baby, I'm not gonna work, whatever, like that. But here's the other thing. I also knew you enough to know that's not even the person that you are.
You're right.
So I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not even who you are. I mean, if you are right now, why don't you do that right now?
Nah. I got purpose.
Just okay.
I got a calling on my life.
It's not who you are. There's
You're
a
right.
purpose and a calling on your life.
Yes.
This is not work to you.
No.
This is what you were designed for. This is your ministry. This is your business. This is the way that you impact the world. This is why God has formed you, right?
Amen.
So you would, there's nothing wrong, by the way, with being a stay-at-home mom. Mm-hmm. That just was not your calling. I knew that. You knew that. And I think you just wanted to throw that out there. So I was like, no, you're not doing that.
I don't remember that's how it went, but I like the way you clean that up. So now something else we talked about was the expectations, right?
Yeah.
Because I knew that your mama was a superwoman, and I had to sing the song, I'm not your superwoman, right? Like, sir, I'm not your mama, right? So I said, look, my cooking is I can learn something from your mom, but I'm not going to be cooking every night. So how did
your cooking has gotten better, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm super proud of you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. At the very beginning, I was learning how to do good lines. Just be like, how is it? How is it, honey?
Bad.
I was like, yeah, it's good. It's good.
Let me talk to y'all out there. Have you ever cooked a meal where the food was so bad you didn't want to eat it? Here go my husband, baby, it's good. I said, see, I can't even trust this man. I can't even trust this man. He would be there like, yeah. I said, I'm not eating it.
I was trying to show gratitude. You know what I mean? I was trying to encourage you to keep cooking. If I told you, girl, this is some really dry chicken. That was not going to encourage you to stay in the kitchen.
You know what I think? I think air fryers save marriages.
Yeah, they do.
As well as cleaning ladies. It just all goes together. So, yeah. So how was that in terms of just your own expectations from childhood coming into a marriage where you knew that I wasn't going to do all the things, you know, and when you start to look at it, right, we've traveled the world. So we've been to Haiti, we've been to Jamaica, we've been to Kenya, we've been so many different places.
Dubai,
we've been to so many places. And what I realize is that if you're this much above poverty, you have help. Right. So even Proverbs 31 talks, Proverbs 31 woman, listen, sis got up early to feed her team. That's my favorite verse. Okay, my favorite line.
Man, you something else.
She had a team,
you
sir.
Something else.
She had a team. And in all these other countries, I noticed that sis has a team. But in America, somehow we are supposed to be the quintessential Renaissance woman that can do business by day, be a freak by night, clean the house and rear the children, and love on her husband totally.
I tell you this. How'd I do it? Constant internal reframes and mind checks. No, seriously, right? Don't think for a moment, right? Because remember, this is all I saw for decades. So it's not just a switch. Oh, yeah, cool. It's just going to be different. Didn't work like that for me. Maybe somebody else, whatever. It was constant reframes. Yeah. It was like, oh, okay. I came in. She didn't ask me to get food. She didn't try to give me no food. All right. All the women I know, that's what they did. Maybe she doesn't love me. No. She loves you. This is just different. That's not the way, she was necessarily raised. It's a little bit, it was a constant reframe. That's what I had to do.
Yeah.
Until I came to a realization like, hey, this is going to be different for you in your relationship. And then now we figure things out. We order from food services and we have our meals prepared, or you learn how to, make you some really good salmon and chicken and salads and all these things. And we adjust, we adapt, and we make things happen, right?
Yeah, because you still complain about me not feeding you the Caribbean food because you ain't trying to gain weight. So the healthy route has been working out, right?
Yeah. I mean, we know that. I mean, I love my Caribbean food, but clearly I know I can't eat that every day.
Exactly.
But we've adjusted, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the thing that you're often trying to help these women to understand is that you got to be willing to adjust and adapt. And this thing of like, this has been my list since I was 30 years old, 25 years old. And now I'm 48 and I'm not changing my list. I'm not lowering my standards. Nobody's saying you got to lower your standards. What we're saying is like, you're in a different season. The people that you are dating are in a different season. Let's take that into perspective. And what are the non-negotiables, right? Yeah. What are those things that, like, these are the things I will not negotiate on? And what are the other things that are preferences, right? But if you don't get those preferences, you'll be okay.
So let's talk about negotiation, right? So we are two people living as one, married. We have a daughter. I feel like there is constant negotiations in relationship. And as single women listening, I know that it can be tough, right? To be doing things your own way, right? And single men the same, your own way. And then now allowing someone into your space and being able to give and take. And a part of marriage, I feel like there's a delicate dance of who gets to get their way, constantly. So how about you talk about what that's been like for you from a male perspective?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? There are laws and principles to negotiation. One of the ones that I believe applies to marriage is that we want to have some kind of a shared vision. And in the shared vision, this idea of a standard negotiation where you're like, hey, it's going to be a win-win, there is a third party in the marriage. There is Andy Henriquez, there's Coach Kaz, and then there's the unity of God, the marriage, right? And so there are going to be times that it may not necessarily be a win-win for Coach Kaz and Andy, but the thing that we want to make sure is winning at all times is the marriage. So there is going to be some compromises in the negotiation. And the moment you start looking at it as like, hey, I'm negotiating with my spouse and we're going to see who wins this negotiation. Well, the reality of it is, if somehow you dominated that negotiation and your spouse took the L, chances are the marriage also took the L, right? So there's a third person that you need to take into consideration in all the negotiations. And I think when you make the marriage the priority, you realize then that, hey, there are going to be some places I got to compromise. There are going to be some things I'm not too crazy about. There's going to be some seasons or whatever. But number one, I know it's a season. Number two, I know that for the sake of the marriage, this is the best decision that we got to make right now. Right. And that's what I think that people miss out on when they are negotiating inside of a marriage, is they think it's like husband and wife negotiating. And they take almost an adversarial role. And it's sort of like, we're not adversaries. We sitting on the same side of the table and we trying to make something be fruitful. We trying to make something work. What is that thing? It's this marriage. Right. And so there will be times where you and I got to compromise, and you and I got to take the shorter end of the stick for the sake of the marriage prospering. And then when you have kids, you throwing in a whole nother, there's a whole nother institution you got to consider, the marriage and also the children, right? So this negotiation goes back and forth. So there's some principles I said with negotiation. Number one, you got to know what you want. For a marriage, we've been pretty clear in what we want overall in our marriage, right? There's some different things that preferences with minor stuff, but we know in our marriage, there's some things that we know that we're not compromising. We're not compromising our faith in our marriage. Amen. We're not compromising putting God at the center. We're not compromising our core values. We're not compromising our freedom. We're not compromising our purpose and the callings that we have on our life. Those certain things we know, non-negotiable, we're not compromised. So you got to know what you want. The second thing is, guess what? You got to be willing to pay the price. Like, people go into marriage thinking it's like, everything's supposed to be roses and sunshine. Right. And it's like, you complete me.
You got to make me happy.
You got to make me happy. Like, sorry, marriage is work. And you have to put in some work. Right? And you can have fun during the work. You will find joy in the work. You'll find satisfaction in the work. But it is work. And if people are bouncing from one relationship to the other, it's because they're trying to find this bliss that doesn't require work. And I'm sorry, it doesn't exist, right? Or if you find that, it's only going to be temporary and it's not sustainable. And then the final part is, number one, you got to know what you want. Number two, you got to be willing to pay the price. Number three, there's got to be an equitable exchange, right? It can't just be one party that is feeding into the marriage and the other one's just like, well, I'm just going to sit back and chill, right? Because what happens is you're going to throw the balance off.
Yeah.
We talk about this in real estate. Like if somebody has a home listed for $5 million and you make them an offer for $5,000, they're not even going to respond. Why?
Right.
It's a non-equitable exchange. It's insulting. Same thing happens in your marriage. If somebody's given, $5 million worth of effort and the other person is given $5 worth of effort, that's a non-equitable exchange.
Yeah.
There's eventually going to be some resentment, some issues there. So we want to win the negotiation. Number one, we got to know what we want. We got to have a shared vision. Number two, we got to be willing to pay the price, and there will be a price to pay, but it's worth it. And number three, there's got to be an equitable exchange. And when there's an equitable exchange, it's beautiful. It's going to have its ups, it's going to have its downs, but at the end of the day, it is beautiful.
I love it. You're beautiful. I love you. Oh my goodness. There's so many things that we talk about. So I'm going to have to bring you back on the show. Let's see here. Now, when we talk about women with drive, driven women, you're married to one, right? Successful women that are focused on their business.
Yeah.
And I find this so often, right? Like Coach Cass, I just want to get somebody on my level because, I'm out here hustling. I hardly have time for me, right? I hear this all the time and I invite them to rest because if they can't take care of themselves, how can they invite somebody else in, right?
Yeah.
But it's just like when you start to think about all the successful women and how driven they are. Yet, when they sit on our couches, when we see them at the barbecue, they're like, dang, you ain't got nobody for me, or even those successful men, like you got a cousin, right?
Yeah.
That's like, I need me a wife, right? Can you find me a wife? What would you say to those folks that are so business driven, yet say they want a relationship?
Well, here's the thing. We've been around enough of those conversations to know what people say is not always what they really want, right? The reality of it is we all can get busy. But at the end of the day, you can always make time for the things that matter or things that you deem to be important. Most of the people who claim that they're looking and searching for a relationship, when you examine their life and you look at what they're doing, you're like, I'm going to challenge you on the fact that you said that you want this because I don't see anything that you are doing that actually provides the evidence that you're looking to, number one, create the space for a relationship, and number two, that you even value a relationship. And so those same women, and we see this all the time, right, Coach Kaz, they'll invest on going on the trips with their girlfriends, and they will invest in making sure they look good and so forth, but have them invest in a therapist to deal with their issues or invest in a love coach, right, to be able to do the work and prepare themselves for this man that they claim that they want. And all of a sudden they're humming and hawing. They're worried about the perception. They are all of a sudden now counting the costs and so forth. Like, wait a second, you say this is something you want, right? You've invested in your business. You've invested in your health. Why would you not invest in this area in your life, right? The other thing is, we talk about this all the time, is just making the room for the thing that you say that you want, right? When you go and you look at certain people's calendars and you look at their daily routine, you're like, wait a second here, you say you want a dude, but literally there is no space in your life. And there's no space, not because you're just that busy, because the same people who claim that they're busy, I guarantee you, if we had access to their Netflix account, we had access to their cell phone, you will find the amount of time that they burn binging on television shows, wasting time on social media. So the reality of it is you can make the time.
So for the women that I've spoke to, many of them will get over busy because they don't want to face being alone, right?
Yeah.
So they'd rather fall asleep on the laptop versus understanding that there's no one here next to me.
Yeah.
Those sad thoughts happen around midnight.
Yeah, we fill the void. We fill the void through our work, right? So there needs to be this moment, this reality moment, right? Where, hey, the thing that I said I want, is it really what I want? Or am I just saying this because it just sounds good, right? And that's what I love about you is you would challenge them with love and get them to come to the realization that you say you want this, but you don't really want this.
Right.
And if you do want this, there's some things you need to do.
Because a man ain't just going to fall in line. You know?
There's some things you need to do.
Yeah. So what about the men? The men that are super focused on work and saying, you know, love will come, you know? I am a certified matchmaker.
Yeah.
But I kind of got out of matchmaking because I found that many of the times it'd be like somebody 65, 70 that forgot to have kids, and it's like, okay, can you find me a 35-year-old? I'm like, no, I will not. Right. So what about that as a driven man and seeing the
I
other
tell you
men
this,
around you?
I think many of the driven men, they got the upper hand. They got the upper hand.
Why?
The dynamics are different. If as an aging man that is doing well, number one, there's no big stigma attached with you going younger and dating a younger woman, right? The dynamics may be a little different if it's a successful woman who wants to go ahead and go and date a little younger. The other thing is a man doesn't have to worry about, oh my goodness, I'm getting a little bit older. Am I going to be able to give this woman a child and so forth? That's not normally the added pressure that they're going to have to deal with.
So much pressure.
And so when these men who are having success, honestly, I think that a lot of times they've got more options. And as a result of them having more options, some of them act a plumb fool.
They do.
Because they know that, right?
Yes.
And it's like, I know I can act a fool and not show up the way that I need to show up. And I'm going to be okay because the picking is slim for some of these women. Things are going well over here. I've got resources. And if a woman at my age doesn't want to deal with me, then I could always go younger. And for that woman, you know, I can provide stability. I could provide a certain lifestyle, etc. And all these things are going through these guys' minds. And, you know, they show up a little bit differently. You know, people show up a little bit differently when they know they got a lot of options, right?
You talking truth out here, man.
Their characters go show up and show out. So if they're a great guy in that season, then that's what shows up. But if they're not the best guy and they got options, what shows up may not be very nice.
So Andy, someone shared like a clip with me online, and it was a woman saying that, you know, kind of every celebrity or whatever goes through the upgrade, right? So they have the starter wife, then they have the wife they go to, right? Like Kevin Hart's before and after, like Shaquille, like all these people that have before and after wives. It's like the before wife was heavier set, homely, did the cooking, had the kids. The second wife, you know, they're going to Milan and to France and doing all the things.
So here's what I say to that. That's a character issue, but it's a lot of pressure, and pressure reveals character.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is, and every scenario is different. So we can't just cast the paint over everything. Right. Some people, they got with somebody very early on, right? And now they have grown significantly, and maybe that person didn't necessarily grow with them. And that's not an excuse, especially if they're married. And instead of investing in that person and helping that person to grow with them, then what happened is they're being exposed to a new world. They're seeing things and all this stuff. And this person is more at home homemaker, and they haven't been inclusive. So the shared experiences aren't the same. And so they're getting into bed with somebody and it feels like a stranger because they've been out there seeing the world, doing all these things. That's one dynamic. The other dynamic is you have two people, they're together early, and this person has been with them. They have grown together. But now this person is conforming to outside pressure.
The men.
Because now they're getting around they have a certain level of status. And now there's a certain level of status, certain amount of resources. And so that's going to attract different calibers of women in the marketplace. Okay. And so now when you have a guy who now has his peers are bringing a different caliber. And when I say caliber, may not even mean character, but understand men are highly visual, right? And so now they've got
about the BBLs and the.
I'm just saying, men are highly visual, and so now their friends are bringing a certain aesthetic around, and then they're doing this comparison thing now, where they're comparing the person that they're with these other women that they're being exposed to. That creates another dynamic right there.
What do women do, right? So for the woman that isn't necessarily the supermodel, does she still have a chance?
Absolutely. I mean, that's not even a question. Absolutely, she's got a chance.
But then how does she keep a man from going to the other caliber?
Well, that's a character thing, right? So
character for the man.
That's character for the man. It's not her job. I mean, well, some people argue with that. When I was going to say it's not her job to keep her man, I would say it is partially, right? But not at the price of meaning that, you know, she's got to go do nip and tuck and all these things. That's not what I mean, right? So it's an interesting dynamic. I think people have to worry about it most when there's a character issue or when people got into the game really, really early, right? I mean, there are some cases where you had a professional athlete got married to his high school sweetheart and they should be growing together. But, you know, this person has been exposed to a different world and they didn't bring their spouse. I think that's the key. You got to bring your spouse on the growth journey. When there's an upward projectile of your life, you can't just have one person experiencing that and the other person be sort of tucked away, no one really know them, etc., and then expect that person to be able to interact in these new rooms, these new spaces, and these new experiences that you're getting in.
Yeah.
Like, you got to take your spouse with you. You just got to do it, right? So that the growth is happening. And, you know, nowadays, I mean, you know, people can work out. They could do stuff to make sure that they keep up, you know, but we have to do that every day. People got to do that. Right?
Yeah. So this hits home for me because you helped me with my story, right? So I was dating a guy that I thought was the one, and we traveled the world together. And one Christmas Eve, I got a call saying, "Yo, Cass, he's married." And my heart was broken. But now hearing what you're saying, essentially, his wife was home.
Yeah.
Right? And he wasn't bringing her out. I was the one he was bringing out and showing off at the company things and all the things. You know what I mean? So
you see a disconnect there, right? So first of all, just for context, so everybody who's listening in, when you found out that he was married,
I walked away.
You were devastated and so forth, right? But there's the issue. You got a guy who's having success. He's hiding his wife, lying about his wife, telling people he's not with his wife. He's having experiences with other women. And now, who do you think all this, who do you think he's going to have the most amount of commonality with and things to talk about? The one that he's doing shared experiences with. And then where do you think the disconnect's going to be? With the wife. Meanwhile, the wife is making the ultimate sacrifice, being at home, allowing him to be able to build the vision, taking care of the house, taking care of the children and so forth. And it's the biggest slap in the face. Like, wait a second, I'm here taking care of this so that you could take care of that. And this is how you repay me?
So that,
you know,
when you go to conferences or when you've had your Story into Profit Live, one of the things that I know is that men have come up to you kind of envying us. Because we seek to be present and to show up in full for each other presently. So what do you normally tell the average
that
guy?
Works for us. So I'll say this, right? I'm at this conference. I'm at this conference, and I had spoken at this conference. And then I came off the stage. I was over to the side. And you were there. You were there. And matter of fact, not only were you there, but this gentleman knew you were there and he had seen you on social media, seen us on social media. And he came up to me and he was just like, man. I was like, hey, what's going on? He said, yeah, man. You know, just, man, I really wish my wife, showed up the way your wife is, man. Like, I'm trying to build this speaker thing, and my wife, it's just not really her thing. She doesn't like really coming out to these events. And I feel like, she's sort of slowing me down in a lot of ways. And I could feel it, but I needed to do a reframe for him. And I had seen him at a couple events. I said, let me ask you a question. How many kids y'all got? He's like, 3. I said, I saw you at this event, and now you're here at this event. I know your kids got to be in school, so where are they right now? Oh, well, one of them's at home with my wife, and my wife takes him up, picks him up, takes him to school, etc. I said, look, what do you call that? Because you just talked about how my wife supports me being here at the speaking engagement, all that. But what do you call that? Is that not support? So I think what happens is we start examining and looking at other people's lives, and we get into this comparison mode when everybody's going to be a little different. And the truth be told, there are other challenges that come with two people who both have businesses, that both have clients, that both have a busy schedule, that both are traveling. So in one aspect, it's amazing because we get these shared experiences. Another aspect, it's highly stressful. And there's a constant negotiation that's having to happen so that we can make sure that we are accounting for both of our businesses and making sure that we both have the ability to shine, and at the same time being able to show up for one another and support one another. And that's a whole dynamic that people don't even see.
Right.
And the average person, truth be told, can't even handle it. It would break their marriage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they think they want that, but that may not be what you need, Jack. And that's what I needed him to understand. Like, what you asking for may not be what you need. Because guess what? If your wife is here right now, who's taking care of those kids?
That part. What you want is different from what you need. And
Yeah.
sometimes what you need is so simple.
Yeah.
My goodness. Andy, I am so grateful for this time that you've spent with me just being real, like
Yeah.
this exclusive deal, because you're a very polished gentleman. So for you to just pull back the curtain and just share your heart and just your perspective of what you've seen and what you've gone through, I appreciate you just being real. I know this was a lot for you coming here. So you also have a book on Amazon?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I do. So it's really cool. Simple to remember because it's the same thing as my IG handle. So my IG handle is Show Up For Your Life. The name of my book is Show Up For Your Life. So all they got to do, anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, online, put Show Up For Your Life, Andy Henriquez. And, this is specifically for the person that you believe that there's a next level in your life, and you are trying to figure out, how do I go from having an ordinary life to living an extraordinary life? The book is built off of this extraordinary story that I share about my mom and the principles that I have watched my mom deploy and the principles that I deployed in my life to be able to grow and scale my business and be able to make amazing impact and, transform literally thousands and millions of lives. Having spoken for companies like Bacardi, Office Depot, Pratt & Whitney, Accenture, Google. And I share that because the principles that I share in that book are many of the principles that I use to go from being a burnt out CPA working for PricewaterhouseCoopers to taking a big leap of faith in December of 2004 and then ultimately chasing down my passion and my purpose and my calling and being able to build a very successful 7-figure speaking and coaching business. So if you want that blueprint, you got to pick up a copy of that book, Show Up For Your Life. And then, of course, make sure that they connect with me on social media and tell me if you enjoyed the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
So family, on our YouTube channel, of course, in our show notes, we'll make sure that it's down below, right, in our Amazon store. So we're going to make sure to add it into our Amazon store, especially with Andy's links.
And I do have to say this. When they pick up Show Up For Your Life, they might as well pick up Wanted Woman, right? They might as well pick up Wanted Woman. It was cool because I think you and I were out and the woman was like, Coach Kaz, I picked up your book and I haven't been able to put it down. I've been reading the whole thing. And then we saw my male cousin And he was like, Coach Kaz, I read your book. Why you giving the women all the plays? Why you telling them all the plays?
Right. That part, it is the busy woman's guide to attracting and choosing a love that lasts. So, baby, I appreciate you.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
we doing special handshakes right now. We doing special handshakes.
I got good lipstick on, but you can give me a kiss. I love you.
I love you too. I love you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So for those that have tuned in today, please make sure to subscribe. Share this episode with your girlfriends, with your guy friends. Make this thing go viral, because at the end of the day, we want to change your views on love one episode at a time. And we can only do that with you. Till next time, keep loving, keep laughing, keep living. Bye.